Hey there folks, so welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're talking about an album I've been looking forward to all year, the newest record from Poets of the Fall, called Clearview. And really, if you've been following me since 2014, you should all know how much I've been looking forward to this album, one of my most anticipated of 2016. But for those of you who haven't been around that long, and might not otherwise be familiar with this band, which I'm imagining is a fair number of you, let me add a little bit of context. Coming out of the alternative rock and metal scene in the mid-2000s, Poets of the Fall is a Finnish band that immediately made a lot of impact with me thanks to a strong melodic focus, strikingly well-written lyrics, and arguably one of the most versatile and expressive singers in the entire genre, courtesy of Marcos Arresto. Their first 4 albums might not have always been consistent all the way through, but you could at least count on at least 3 or 4 songs that kicked all amounts of ass. It would have been frontrunners for some of my favorites of any given year. Never quite as immediately abrasive as some of their contemporaries, but their knack for really good hooks and power ballads made them favorites of mine all the same. It also meant they didn't age nearly as badly as some of their contemporaries either. And yet, in 2014 with their album Jealous Gods, things seem to be changing a bit. For one, coming after the damn near untouchable record Temple of Thought in 2012, there is a marked shift in direction towards more experimental pop sounds, more towards the mainstream, which I have to admit is a pretty bold move. It's probably their most polarizing record among their fans, although for me, didn't shy away from any of their strengths and remains pretty damn kick-ass in my books, landing on my list of my favorite albums of 2014. But I'll admit, without hearing any singles, I was going into their album Clearview with no real view into any of it, or any idea where the band would take their sound next. Would they continue more down the pop path, venture back to alternative rock and metal, or do something unexpected altogether? So what do we get with Clearview? Well, folks, there was a change here, and it certainly was unexpected, and here's the thing, unless you're a diehard fan, you're probably not going to notice it. Hell, most people going into this album will probably think it's just another pretty damn solid Poets of the Fall record, with its typical blend of gorgeous melodies and riffs with real heft and punch to match the intricate and frequently gorgeous writing and performances. And yet, there is a shift on this album. It's a small one, but it shows just what could have been one of the best albums of 2016 can be rendered a lot weaker. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still a good album, but this should have been amazing, on par with Temple of Thought or Jealous Gods, and the fact that it's not is a real disappointment. It is a good album, I like this, but I really wanted to love it, and I'm kind of disappointed that I don't. So before we get to that change, we need to talk about what this album does right, and make no mistake, the fundamentals of this formula are still incredibly solid. Marcos Arresto remains one of the most potent singers working in this genre, capable of huge belting on one song before switching into a softer voice that proves just why Poets of the Fall have some of the best at writing rock and metal ballads over the past 15 years, and they've always had a knack for some great melodic hooks with some really solid grooves. The bass lick on the chorus of The Game, that noisier roar coming off of a really slick pre-chorus change-up on Shadow Play, the melodic swell that builds into center stage, and the real gothic elegance that gives the band another ballad staple with Moonlight Kiss, the closing song. Not quite the level of Sleep or Where Do We Draw the Line or All the Way for You. And then there's the 2 best songs on this album though, the gorgeous layers of guitar that build to Children of the Sun, including a fantastic outro, and the great choppy groove that makes the hook of Crystalline so damn sticky for me, probably one of my favorites here. And you know, a lot of the lyrics come together pretty well too. I wouldn't say they're quite as consistent as Jealous Gods was, but there is a lot to like here, even if the songs are playing intentionally broad yet again. Thematically, we aren't that far removed from usual Poets of the Fall territory. After all, if we're gonna find a band that can make affirmation or self-esteem anthems sound fresh again, songs like Children of the Sun and Center Stage are solid examples of doing this sort of thing right, as well as the open embrace of love at the end of the tunnel on Crystalline. And just like Jealous Gods, this album also takes its aim at the flashy veneer of celebrity and prefers to cut down to something real, like how the puppet master of love subverts and satirizes the game, or how The Child and Me, we have a refocus on finding innocence in something real in some people, or the slam against cronies on Shadow Play that might as well be Poets of the Fall's version of Gold Digger. And I like the framing of this too, because Arresto has no problem admitting on songs like Drama for Life or Crystalline that he doesn't have all the answers. He can get caught up in the superficiality of it all too. He understands that allure, and he really makes that come through in his music. And on songs like The Labyrinth or Moonlight Kiss, it becomes clear that when you leave it all exposed, when you put it all out there, you are that much more open to pain or loss. You might have clarity of purpose and emotion, but that will come at a price. Now that said, I didn't really love the jabs at ex-lovers on Once Upon a Playground Rainy. I mean, I appreciate admitting your own naivete when it comes to these relationships, but it still comes across as more petty than it should, and Seresto isn't that great at selling that emotion, especially in that vocal range. So yeah, these sort of broad strokes for Poets of the Fall, they really do work. These are some potent themes. Unfortunately, this is where we have to talk about that change in sound, and that comes in the production, because for the first time in their career as a band, Poets of the Fall did not self-produce this album. No, instead it was handled by a guy called Stefan Bowman, and if you know the name at all, it's because of his work with Kent or Helicopters, or maybe because of some of the engineering work he did way back in the late 90s boy band scene. He worked with Aqua and the Backstreet Boys. I say all this because the production is the biggest reason that this album isn't nearly as good as I would expect from Poets of the Fall. See, for a band that kept their production in-house, they've always had a remarkable knack for tone and mix balance. The melodies come through cleanly on the guitars while still having bite and texture. The mix has plenty of room to breathe, and all the tones come through cleanly. You're not losing anything here. And for the life of me, I have no idea why they went with Bowman, because his mixing sounds like someone trying to force a Poets of the Fall sound without getting all the details properly. Take the first single, Drama for Life. On a compositional level, it's fine except for the non-solo, but it's so obviously compressed, and the shift from verse to chorus takes place with an audible thud, which also happens on Shadow Play for no good reason, including additional compression and effects on Seresto's voice. They aren't needed in the slightest. He's your strongest asset. It comes up more blatantly on Center Stage. You don't need to add compression to the vocals on the hook to make the song sound big. Seresto can handle it all by himself if you give him the room. Similar case for the Labyrinth. The sparse acoustics and the strings, they could carry plenty of body, but Bowman saw fit to drown the song in reverb. Why? And on the game, you get an outro that's got this borderline tremolo guitar riff that could have sounded amazing with a little bit more muscle to it in the mix, but the electric guitar mixing feels blurred over too many times. You don't get that dramatic swell. Tellingly, the mixing problems don't come up on the most blatantly pop song here on The Child in Me, which I actually didn't mind how the guitar is balanced against the wiry synths. It actually gets a little bit of groove on the chorus. But if we're going for an electro rock fusion, this even could have hit harder. Unfortunately, when we do get a guitar tone that stands out with a little bit more emphasis, it's on Once Upon a Playground Rainy. I know some people like that flattened Red Hot Chili Peppers-esque guitar tone, but it definitely does not fit for this song or for Poets of the Fall, and I'm not really sure I can blame Bowman for that. Now granted, assigning blame anywhere here is kind of frustrating, because I get that Poets of the Fall, they want to push their sound in a different or new direction, but on some level, they really didn't do that on a compositional level. They just got a producer who doesn't seem to have a coherent sound or vision, and thus mess with a workable template. But putting Stefan Bowman aside for a second, on a compositional level, does this record rise to the level of their best? Honestly, kind of hard to tell with the production, but I'd probably say no. There's a couple strong hooks that I really like, but more often than not, this album falls into a Poets of the Fall template that's been refined by their 7th album that's definitely agreeable, but it could do with the sort of innovation that takes them in a slightly different sonic direction while maintaining their strengths. And as such, for me, this is a like 7 out of 10, and really a recommendation if you're only a Poets in the Fall fan. There are other albums, you could probably check them out, especially Temple of Thought, Carnival of Rust, or Jealous Gods. They're all stronger. Look, I still really like this band, and for the most part, I like this album, but this was a misstep. Let's hope it gets corrected, and let's hope it's sometime soon. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. I'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Guys, I got the poll up here, but honestly, I can't imagine a lot of Poets of the Fall fans being happy with this. I don't know if this review is going to be all that contentious, because they've made better music than this, I gotta be honest. Anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. My album list is full up, can't take any more requests, it's gonna be a busy couple of weeks. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.